welcome Karen.
Hello. I've been in Vintage about 2 years, and I do photographic digital collage, which is it's a title I made up myself because there wasn't really a type of what I did. When I thought about how I do this, it occurred to me that broadly speaking, there's two ways you can do it. You can talk about how you do things, or you can talk about why you do things. And those are the two approaches I've come across. Or you can kind of try and blend the two. And the decision I realised I had to make was whether I made it personal or not personal, and how much I kept private and how much I shared. And I've sort of gone a middle road, really. But I did feel that I had to be personal to a certain extent, because otherwise some of the art I've done makes no sense. The other thing I'd like to do is show a kind of progression and talk about why people in practice change direction. Because I think in my practice there have been two things that have happened that have really changed what I did. So, this opening piece, this is something I did an enormously long time ago, and this is sort of how it all began. This is just straight collage. It's actually at the back of the room. This is just me standing up somewhere with a pair of scissors and an awful lot of magazines. And if I needed a repeat image, I would go and take 20 leaflets out of a bank or something because it had an egg on it, or and I needed 20 eggs. So this is pre-Photoshop. It's before I knew how to do photographs. It's just incredibly kind of basic, really. And the bit at the back is wallpaper. So how I tend to work is I have an idea, and then I try and push it to the extreme, and then when I've got to the extreme and I don't think I can do it any better, I sort of go to something else. And I chose this picture because it's the picture I thought was the best collage I did, that was just pure collage, and I didn't think I could push it any further. So this piece, I was just using the paper to build up as you'd use paint. It's just shapes that I cut out and built people's faces up using paint. So the only things that are just the objects from magazines and things are things like the coins, the pound coins and the notes and that kind of stuff. The rest is all just made with paper. So I'm incredibly pleased with it, actually. So this is one of my very favourites. So that's the most extreme version of what I felt I could do in collage. During that period, I also did things that had no emotional content and were just pretty patterns, really. And this is one of those. This is called Jupiter, used as a bottle stopper. And it was just a bit of fun, really. So that's just about colour and shape. And you can really see that I've just cut things out of magazines with that. So those two are the sort of example of the first phase of my practice and how it built up to what I do now. And what happened then was I really hurt my back. Well, this is my sort of early 30s. And I injured my back, which meant that some movements were difficult. So I really couldn't stand up for 4 hours cutting this paper out. And I had to actually radically change what I did. So that's when I come back to saying things that move things on or make you change what you do. What I actually did was I went away and learned how to take photographs, because the movements in taking photographs are much more varied, actually. And I got the injury through doing loads of repetitive movements. So I didn't want to re-injure myself, basically. Okay, so then I had a whole long period of photography. And this is all pre-Photoshop. So it's really quite kind of a bit mad, really. And now you see you could do them on Photoshop so easily, but I didn't even know about Photoshop these days. So this is completely photographic. But what it is it's 12 pictures stuck together with glue on a board. So it's rubber gloves arranged on a, if you see what I mean, each one of those images is 4. And I had a little kind of contraption I made with 2 mirrors, so you could put the photograph in it and see what it would look like as a kaleidoscope. And I did loads of these, and it was I really enjoyed doing them. They were absolutely huge. They're really big. I mean, they're sort of like this big. So most of what I do is quite big, actually. But it's just an example of not really involving any emotion in it. I mean, there's nothing emotional, that's just pure, pattern and shape and fun, isn't it? And I think this whole period when I was working with photographs tends to be just about ideas, and there was very little autobiographical in it. And, it wasn't emotional, and I wasn't exposing myself, really. It's quite safe stuff to do, really. This is, I got very interested in still lifes. So again, that was an idea that I, am I blocking your view? This was an idea that ran and ran, and I did many permutations of this. The idea being it's supposed to be so busy it almost becomes abstract. And it's supposed to look like it's being manipulated, but it hasn't been manipulated. It is purely a still life with big onion flowers shoved in a vase full of water and lots of sweet peas and glass and water and reflection. And there were an awful lot of those. This was another whole long sort of project I did. Again, very sort of neutral. That is actually just a photograph, but it's not. And I call them. I think I call them landscapes or something. And they're not really landscapes. They're mock landscapes because the process is I would lay muslin on the floor and tinsel and I can't even remember what I used actually. Lots of different colours. I shine light on some of the tinsel so it made a little light, and then I put the camera on quite a long exposure and just sweep it over like that. And of course it was enormously wasteful because I would take the film to the processors and sometimes the whole film would be complete rubbish. That happened again and again and again. So the ones that I actually liked probably were 10 in the end. But this one I'm really fond of. So I think I call this Furl Beacon. Did I call this Furl Beacon?
Call this Furl Beacon.
So it's kind of like Trompe l'oeil, really, which of course I really like. I really like Trompe l'oeils. And then, so this is carrying on with the still life idea, and I got into Dutch still lifes. And actually this came out of the fact somebody turned up at the doorstep with a gift of 2 dead pheasants and 2 dead ducks. Which, we almost couldn't bear to, it was kind of, we almost couldn't bear to do things with them. So I thought, well, okay, give God an opportunity, I'll do this. So I did sort of low life photography, and it's supposed to be rather like the memento mori, sort of death and decay bits. It's a dark and gloomy. So there was a series of those. So they're all, again, they're all sort of ideas that I was very interested in. There's not particularly much of my, I'm not, again, I come back to this, I'm not sort of exposing myself, it's at a safe distance. I'm doing art that is references other arts, uses lots of composition, colour, etc., but doesn't tell anybody about me. Right, the next thing that happened is actually this. So this is my prop. This is a funny little box full of little bits of cardboard. Okay. I'm going to read out something that I wrote at the time because I can't really quite recreate how I felt when I got hold of this. So this is where the shift happens. My father died in 1962 when I was very small, so that I missed knowing him. When my brother died 18 years ago, it turned out that he'd hidden away a box he'd found in my mother's attic of my father's photographic negatives, hundreds of them. They ended up with me. I wasn't keen on engaging with them initially, since by then they'd got tied up with more than one kind of loss. A sense that something had to be done with them, though, not to mention a growing curiosity about what might be among them, meant that eventually I bought a scanner that could convert the black and white negatives into positive images on the computer screen. In short bursts, it was a mammoth task, since every picture my father had ever taken was there. I started to trawl through them. I'd had no idea he'd been such a keen photographer. The negatives were arranged fussily in little cardboard mini folders, each catalogued with a letter of the alphabet, weirdly, and not usually related to the subject matter at all, squashed into a small oblong tin. Some of the pictures I'd seen before in a family photo box, but all the images he'd judged too light or dark or uninteresting to develop were new to me. My earlier pieces of work relating to this hoard came out of a need to exorcise the impact of revisiting the past in this way. It was strange to find out entirely new things about my father. Half consciously at first, and then with acknowledgement, I started to form a sort of collaboration with him. Though the starting ideas came from these ancient negatives taken by both him and also my grandfather, they rapidly evolved to incorporate my own photographs taken as and when I thought the story needed them. I loved the idea of a collaboration with beloved people who are so long gone, one that laughed at the meanness of time. So that's what I wrote at the time, which I can't quite recreate now. But anyway, so this is it. And the thing is that there are hundreds and hundreds of them, and I hadn't seen most of these. It was a weird thing to do. So anyway, I've chosen a few just to show you what the variety is like of these things. So this was a surprise, you know. This is national. He did rockets. He made rockets as part of his national service. Well, I didn't know there were any pictures of those. I mean, presumably, I don't know. I don't know where they were taken. I tried to find out. I couldn't find out. But you know, interesting. That's an example of why he didn't actually, why I haven't seen these before. Right? I think that might be my grandmother. But you know. Yeah. And this, you know, these amazing sort of. He obviously had a go at being a portrait artist. I know that's my auntie, and that's my auntie's son. And I think that's kind of unnerving in many respects. But he was obviously having a go at being a bit arty, I think, with that, making them pose and making them, etc. And there's quite a few of those actually. And that's one. I just put that because it was really sweet, and I hadn't seen it before. And that's me and my brother at Christmas. I still got some of those toys actually. Next one, and that's, you know, oh, what a lovely rose. No, next one, and that's interesting because it's not actually. I think it's my father, but obviously trying to be a bit arty there with a, you know, which I think is quite kind of nice in the late 50s. No idea, but I think that's quite sweet. I think I know where they are. I think it's my grandmother's garden, but I don't know who they are at all. And again, there was loads of this sort of stuff, you know, loads of buildings like this, and I am assuming he just took them because he fancied trying out a camera or. Don't know. I have no idea. But anyway, that's that. No idea where that is. And that I like because it's elephants. I think it must have been the circus coming to town. I'm not quite sure where it is. It might be Cambridge. Don't know. I mean, but isn't that nice? But obviously you can see it's too blurry. England wasn't worth developing. And I didn't know he was interested in sculpture at all. I actually did work out. I've got a friend who's very knowledgeable about sculpture, and she knows which exhibition that was. It was 1953 or something in London, blah, blah, blah. And I can't remember who it's by. And then that I think is quite interesting because it's obviously some intimate little moment or little, you know, they obviously were, I don't know, when my parents were just married, it was some moment they had, I don't know. I like the mystery of it. You can't retrieve that. You're never going to find it out. You can tell me what that is. I think that's quite interesting. There's not a lot of this sort of stuff, you know. That's a thing picture. And that's great, this is one of my favourites. I mean, what's that? Anyway. And there's that one, I like that one too. That's, if anybody wants to try that. Next one. And then that's, my father obviously had to go at doing ha-ha pictures, and he's the one with the umbrella over his head. And it, you know, ha-ha look, he thinks it's raining because the watering cans. That was a bit preemptive, can I just say?
Sorry?
Anyway, so basically, there were quite a few of those. There were several where he tried to do double exposures to make it look like a ghost, which is quite interesting. Which I was quite. So I hadn't seen any of those things before. It was really fascinating. Anyway, but it was like being given a task, you know, or a part-time job or something. And I didn't. In order to work out what I was going to do with all this stuff. I realised if I wanted to use them, I had to learn how to do Photoshop. So that's what happened next. I went and learned how to do Photoshop, which led to lots of different pieces of work where I no longer avoided being very personal, because actually all of this stuff really churned me up. And it took me 2 years to wade through this. And I had to stop and go away from it for a while sometimes, because it was all just a bit too much. but I began to realize I wanted to incorporate it into art. So Photoshop's in the obvious way because you could actually really use it. So some of the pieces of work that follow use his photographs, some of them use my grandfather's photographs, and some of them just use mine. But in a way, they're all the same sort of idea, which is bringing different points of the past into one place. And yeah, they're just, a lot of them are supposed to be fun, and they're not necessarily doom laden. But there certainly is a lot of loss in some of them. Right, so there's a whole series of work.
Was that a yes?
That was a little obscure, yeah. So this is a series of 4 I did using buildings that my father had taken photographs of. None of it which I knew. I have no idea where these buildings came from. I think it might have been a B&B, that house, even though it looks so awful. And then, they like awful B&Bs in the 50s. So this is North Bagham piece where this is the earliest picture. There's my brother and I in the corner. It's about the loss of my father, which happened when I was about that old. And it moves on to that one. These join up in a long line, and they all sort of actually do join, but they're 4 individual pictures. So this is more fun. This is sort of, what did I call this one? I called this the House of Imagination. It was not a picture that my father had taken, but I incorporated silly pictures. I mean, my father's family, they did a lot of dressing up, So that's my father with a beard and a gun, for some reason. And again, behind the gateway is my granny with a mob cap, which I still have got the mob cap somewhere. So it's all sort of, I don't know, larks. And then it's my father and his brother sort of being soldiers, because actually it was in fact the war. So this picture was a thank you to my grandmother and grandfather for providing a very imaginative environment, because they did. Moving on, sort of through time actually. That's my grandmother on her honeymoon on the Isle of Wight in 1920 something. But she is paddling next to me and my daughter swimming. So I've kind of made her join us here. And so we're all together. So it's sort of making people, resurrecting people really. Next one. And then coming straight into the present day. So you have to imagine that actually sort of links up. So it's like basically like a street really. And that's obviously a house that my father didn't take a picture of. It's the house we lived in when I did this picture. And that's my husband and son sitting there having a chat. And there's lots of our dog, which some of you may recognise. So I try and put lots of people in it that mean things to me. So actually, on the very far left there's Kim and Jen. Kim is actually over here, but she got every time I framed the picture she used to get cut off because it sort of, it didn't quite go far enough. And Helen, who's sitting here, is in one of the windows, and as is my daughter, my son. So I sort of try to make everybody in there, bring everybody together.
Elizabeth?
Elizabeth is walking up here.
Oh, Elizabeth isn't here, of course.
No, she's not here then. And so then the next sort of series of work I did is Doll's House pictures. I did 3 of these. They were incredibly labour intensive actually. This is Elizabeth again. So I do a mock-up of the Doll's House like this, obviously. Well, everything was all over. But if anybody wants to come and have a look afterwards, do, because it's well, if you're interested in Doll's House, have a little play. Anyway, this is that. But obviously the people just wouldn't turn up to be in it. But that was really good fun. I got people to sort of. A friend said to me, this is very controlling, don't you? And I thought, actually, yeah, it really is, isn't it? But so there's quite a lot of people in there. I made them pull crackers and that kind of stuff. And that was just pure, I just loved doing that. And Alex, who's over here, is on the roof this Father Christmas. But this one's Elizabeth. Each of these had a poem attached to it, actually, or a piece of writing attached to it. There was a very sad Anglo-Saxon poem about somebody whose lover has gone away and is never going to come back. Went with that picture. This was a ghostly picture. There's a sort of Victorian poem that talks about my baby's gone down the plug hole, which some people might know. That was this one, because it's all ghosty. So all the ghosty pictures are either my father's pictures or some of them are actually my grandfather's pictures. I think that works least well actually. That one kind of annoys me now actually, somehow. It didn't quite work, but I quite enjoyed doing it. And that's the one that you can see on the wall here. So actually you can't really push them up that big actually, because a lot of them are using old photographs. The resolutions actually, you have to kind of fit the old resolution in somehow, so they have a limitation on how big you can do them. Because you're trying to match the modern photographs to the really low resolution picture from the past. So this one has got my children in it twice, well 3 times actually, and the dog, and various friends, you know, doing darky things. That's my favourite. No, that kind of played itself out, although I think I might do one more. I really fancy doing one at a party. So it might have a bit of a, what's the word you use, bit of leeway on it. Okay. So now I come to the picture that's over there, and I just wanted to sort of slightly focus on how you start something like this, you know, what's the beginning points. This is a lot more about the how for a minute. There's a series of 3 of these. They work in a completely different way from the one that goes from right to left and goes through time. This one comes forward. So there were 3, and it's a Chinese box thing, so where this is the base picture, you might have to flick back and forwards here, but if you do the next one, that's the next picture, and you can see the first picture is completely contained through that doorway. And then the third picture is completely contained, they're both contained through that archway, 3 archways. So the idea is that you as a viewer are sort of moving backwards. And so you finish up, you're sort of slightly up a hill actually, looking down. You're behind these plants here, looking at this scene. And the progression of the children's lives is coming forwards through time. So there's two movements in this. One is the ages of the children, and the second is the idea you're sort of almost levitating backwards. So it's very complicated, but I do like that. If I go back, I think did I put the other one?
No.
Oh yeah, yes. So this is how I'm just going to say how I actually started these 3 pictures, which were so complicated to do. This is how it starts. So that's me. There's my desk. That's what a blank canvas on Photoshop looks like for anybody who's not used Photoshop. So out of that has to come something. So this is where all these 3 pictures started, is this photograph of my grandmother. It's the same grandmother who was paddling in the sea. And she was called Arabella, and she's there with her brother, and they lived in Stamford in Lincolnshire. And if you go 2 on, we just skipped that last one. Yeah. So it just struck me as incredibly similar to this photograph I had of my children. This is Harriet's first day at school. Because they both look very serious, actually, don't they? But I just thought that was such a parallel image. It began to sort of play on me, that sense you could kind of put them in one picture together and play with that parallel, 2 generations apart, and yet you've got that same sort of configuration. You go back one. So this is based around the Mockingbird lyrics, or I guess it must be an old song, I think, where it is all about what you're going to give your children, you think. I mean, obviously, and it becomes rather fantastic. It's what you want to give your children, but you know you're not necessarily going to be able to give your children because you're fallible. So this was the poem or song or whatever that accompanied this series of 3 pictures. So you can move one on. So this is. I said that my first idea was I was going to find I was going to find 2 doors that were right next to each other, and it was going to work like that. The two lots of children were going to be in those doors, and I just didn't find any doors that I liked. I didn't like those doors really. It didn't quite work for me. So I chucked that idea out a bit actually. But what I did use was this door. Actually not in this picture, not in that picture actually, but I'd used this picture in the second and third images, which is the church door of the church in Stamford where my grandparents got married, which I thought was a lovely, lovely door, and it also has that huge resonance. So that's how I suppose I use that as an example of how you start off thinking you're going to do one thing, you end up doing something else. And actually the doorway that I did use in the end was something altogether other. What happens next when you do the next? What am I doing next? Yeah. So we were on holiday in Montreuil-sur-Mer in France, and we came across this building which I thought was a chapel, but I don't think it is actually. I think it's something else. And I thought it was a fantastic doorway, so I took that photograph. And later on, that became the sort of baseline of that first picture, if you see what I mean. So there it is. The doorways that I eventually used, one of them was in France, I think one of them was somewhere completely different. But the children are still, as it were, side by side, but in a much sort of grander setting, and it evolved like that. So that one doorway I then cloned. So it goes like that. So there's two buildings there, and then obviously behind there's a sort of cloned building to make it rather improbable, actually. And then decorated it with all sorts of things. I mean, there's bits of the pavilion in there. The interesting building, the structure at the back is again something near Stamford. The steps, I think, were Preston Park. The plants were from a garden centre. The car, we had friends who set up an organic nursery, and they hired an enormous greenhouse, which was completely it was actually, the greenhouse wasn't derelict, but it was completely overgrown and full of complete rubbish. And that car was just in the greenhouse, along with another car actually, which appears in another picture. So what I'm aiming for is something that's really dense with meaning, because that appeals to me for some reason, and has a lot of references. There's a little, and I did put a little stalk at the top, but I thought that was a little bit cheesy, so I made it very small and very unobvious, because it's about my children. And then lots of things like birds soaring, the idea of flight, breadth, the world opening up. That's part of the reason for the architecture, is the idea of the world being out there, being very sort of rich and dense. So it's like a sort of a wish, hoping that your children experience all this and have that kind of richness. And all of these three pictures are supposed to be very fecund. It's supposed to be full of plants, full of life. And if do you want to, can you just flip back to one of the others? Doesn't matter which one. That's the last one, isn't it? So again, the idea that the plants are sort of taking over the world, really, and water's taking over the world, which is not necessarily a joke. Those arches in the middle are Ely Cathedral. The windows are from Croatia. Those posts are from Barratt Station. So that's what I really like, is bringing it all together, making it all kind of work as a fantasy landscape, but one that probably has more possibilities than our actual landscape. That last picture, there was a couple of what was after that? It was the so this is something I did. This is just an example of how many different sources make one picture. I did this when I was exhibiting this series, to show people what I'd done, because it's difficult if I'm not here to explain it, isn't it? What it's about. People don't really understand what they're looking at necessarily. So these are all the original photographs. So that's what you do, and using Photoshop you cut and stick. But you can't just cut and stick and slap them on, because they look like you slap them on. You have to integrate them and make the light and the resolution look right, and you have to make it look as if people have got shadows. I mean, the biggest problem with putting people in these things is that mostly that's exactly what people do in a photograph, is look out. And with the doll's house ones, for example, you don't want people to look out, you want them to look natural. So it's actually quite hard to find photographs. You have to actually sort of take photographs that make it look normal. So that's essentially how I came to be doing what I'm doing. I think I'm nearly at the end of this, actually, and I don't know quite what I would do next. Currently I'm working on a portrait. There's a portrait I did about 15 years ago of my son. And there was always a sense I needed to do a matching portrait. I mean, these are really big. These are almost full scale. And they are using a little bit of Photoshop, some just ordinary colours, some paint actually, and lots of photograph material. And then the last picture I wanted to show you is that's what I'm doing at the moment, which is the portrait of my daughter. Obviously there isn't my daughter in there exactly. Well, that's her when she's little. This actually, interestingly enough, sort of goes right back to the beginning and is a lot of literally cutting and sticking. So I'm printing things off Photoshop and I'm cutting them out with a pair of scissors and I'm sticking them on the wall, on the canvas actually. So in a way, I'm sort of edging back to what I did at the beginning. But as I say, I think this might be the last one, and I don't know what happens after that. So around the room, I put up the very first collage that's just collage over there, and then I put up the doll's house because I quite like it, and I put up that one because I think that's sort of almost like the end of that process, and it's the progression, and yet they're actually very linked. So that really is all I've got to say about it, because that brings me up to the present day. And I think it might be, if anybody wants to ask questions. Hi there. Hello.
Why are you sticking and pasting in reality then? What made you want to do that after doing Photoshop?
And partly it's because they're so huge, these, that in fact I've only got an A3 printer, and I mean I could go and paste, you know, to have sort of 6 foot photographs and spectrum, but actually it kind of forces you to think, if I want a leaf or sort of twig, I have to actually print it out, then I have to cut it out, then I have to stick it on. I think it's something to do with the size of this actually. Does that make sense?
Another question.
How big is it?
How big is that? Oh, it's 4 foot by 6 foot, which is exactly the same size as the other one.
How long did the one on the easel take?
I think they take 5 to 4 months, like, you know, not because they literally take 5 months, but because actually it has to kind of evolve. I mean, when I started it, it was just the 2 photographs in the doorway. So obviously, it's not much of an idea. You know, you sit staring at that blank sheet, and it builds itself around that. And then you think, oh, that's a nice little bit. But they're very slow, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
And you've told us a lot about the autobiography, and if you don't hear that, if you don't know that, how important, I suppose, is that to the kind of understanding of the work, do you feel, or, yeah?
Well, I think you'd be able to, you'd sort of have a sense that it was spooky about the past if you saw it, I think, and I think I think you might understand something you could relate to your own family and generations. I think you'd get that. And I hope there's so many references in it that you know, would mean something else to somebody else. I mean, I put a lot of birds in that tend to mean different things to me. You know, sort of birds of loss and death, and birds of sort of pleasure and flight and all that sort of stuff. And I kind of think probably those are well enough known that there would be that resonance too. I just think, like, for example, the car, you know, that kind of is obviously a knackered car. It's not going to go anywhere. So that's obviously some kind of reference to decay. You know, you could guess a lot, couldn't you? So I hope they're not so personal that they don't mean anything. I think that's the final point. Yeah.
Do they have titles?
They do have titles. I forgot to say them all the way through the talk. They all have titles. What did I call that? I mean, but sometimes they're a bit made up, the title, because they perhaps don't necessarily really. But so that series is a guy called Mockingbird because of the lyric.
When do you make design on the title?
It sort of comes as you're going along. I mean, the one that was all houses, were always going to be houses. Actually, that's not true. Initially, they were going to be birds. They were going to be named after the birds in them. And then, it was so obviously 4 houses. I thought, well, you know. Initially, it was going to be like a street. I was going to do a street, and it didn't really turn into a street because the water kept infringing. Yeah, so they were called the House of Lost, the House of Imagination, the House of Light, and the House of Love. So they did, actually. And these were just called Doll's House dramas because they didn't really have titles. They were just things you did in the Doll's House.
They sort of meant to make sense as real landscapes. Like, could you do like a 3D map of them or something? Or
Almost. You can almost do that. That is the idea, yes. But you know, that's a stretch.
do you ever imagine that you're really little and you're walking around inside them? Could you?
I could
you
imagine
wanted
that.
to? Okay.
But I mean, there's certainly supposed to be a sense that there are doorways that you can go through. And in that one, could you find that one again? In that one, there's very definitely
That would be good, isn't it?
Yeah, but the first one, there's this sort of staircase that was in a chateau in France or something. That first one that's there. I love the fact that's leading away somewhere. So I think there's definitely a sense of things beyond. And in fact, in that one, in the dark, I'm in there in the dark, but you don't know because it's too dark. I mean, on Photoshop, on Photoshop you can make me appear. But the thing is, my daughter said to me, "You never put yourself in your pictures." So I put myself in there, sort of hidden away. But as a child, actually. So that's sort of intense, isn't it? It's kind of like I don't know why I do that really. But I am in there hidden. So there's sometimes things hidden, or in some of them, there are lots of little animals, but they're so tiny you really have to look very hard. In that third one, it's good at this, having spoken. I mean, or maybe the second one. There's lots of little frogs in there. I mean, obviously, maybe this one. There's lots of little frogs and mice in this one.
That's what the young people call Easter eggs.
What's that one you put in the
hidden
house?
things.
Yeah. And then there's, I mean, you can see this better on the actual picture because this is, as I say, this is pushing it up beyond what it can tolerate. There's 2 little sort of swimming pigs there, which I have to say I did nick from Photoshop, which, you know, and I mean there are copyright issues around some of this, but mostly I take the photographs. But sometimes if it's a swimming pig, I couldn't resist it. But there's 2 little swimming pigs there, which on the, I think you can probably just about see our pigs on the picture. Yeah. So it's partly making landscapes that you sort of like to be in because they're so sort of wild. And I like the idea of the water infiltrating.
Would you mind terribly if somebody looked at it and it told them a whole different story?
No, I don't mind at all.
Yeah.
During the last Open Studios, the one that has my grandmother paddling, somebody came and bought that print. And as he was going, he said, "Who is this one? What do you put that woman in there for? You know, I mean, she's horrible." And I said, "I'm going to cut her off." So off he went, and I thought,
Re-edit.
So you know, that's an extreme version. I thought, oh, silly man. But you know, yes, don't mind at all really. Because how could you, you know...
It's just that you used the word understand earlier, and I don't know whether that was the best word, because there's lots of songs I like, and I don't actually listen to the lyrics, don't understand what they're singing about, I don't recognise the music when it's written down.
Yeah.
I don't understand any of it. I just like it
Yeah.
and love it and sing along the wrong lyrics and everything. I don't necessarily want to understand it. I just want to enjoy the
Yeah,
song.
that
And
is,
somebody might think the same of visual art, and there's no reason why you have to understand it anyway.
No.
I mean, it could be in Welsh and you still like it, you know.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, also, I don't understand. I mean, I don't know that house at the back. I think it's probably in Wisbech. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know either. You know, it's sort of a rather sort of interesting house, isn't it?
Should be on a moorland somewhere.
It should, shouldn't it? I think it was, you know, in the Fens zone. Well, I think so. And the little sheds were a kind of ticket office at Barrow
Furnace Abbey.
Furnace Abbey, which was redundant anyway. But you know, it's just a little hobbit homes, you know.
Just editing that woman out.
I know.
Do you start off with a kind of storyboard of where things are going to be, you know,
No.
how it's going to be laid out?
No.
I mean, on the portrait one, for example, there's obviously a whole other specific place for
Yes.
the subject.
So I did do that. That's true. On that
So
one, I did.
you've obviously got
Yes.
a plan
Yeah.
of how it's
Yeah.
going to be laid out.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
But that's probably unusual. Usually it would just be, it looks a bit blank over there, you know, put another tree. It's sort of a bit like that. So I suppose it's partly dictated by what you can find in the way of material. If you can't find a bit of wall you want, you have to perhaps sort of manipulate it a bit more. But I mean, I do play around, and I do quite a lot. In this one, I used quite a lot of cloning. But they're enormous files, obviously, and they have lots and lots and lots of layers. So you could always go back and change it if you want. Well, I never do, but you could if you wanted to.
You could have offered that bloke version without the...
Yeah, well, I thought he'd know that's been far too much encouragement, wouldn't it?
With all your views through archways, I have to ask, do you have any interest in seeing these paintings?
See these paintings as specifically...
Renaissance, seeing these paintings.
Well, I think, I mean, with that kind of architect, there always is that in the back of it, isn't there? Yeah.
The views through the doorways and
yes.
stairs and things.
Not really, but it probably is the same impulse, isn't it? Because yes, it is. You know, it's inviting you to go to the door, and you don't know what's through the door, etc., etc. It's a kind of adding a dimension, isn't it? It's trying to give it depth, really, which is what I do try and do.
It's a funny depth though, isn't it? Because most of your collages are very frontal,
Yeah.
so the only depth that's provided is the space through the door.
Well, it's
In a lot-
usually
in a lot of ways,
horizons. Yeah, there's usually something not to be on that one actually. The horizon's quite nearby, but that one, that other one was quite interesting, wasn't it? So that's got the Isle of Harris on the back actually. So that's actually got quite a lot of depth. Is that kind of what you mean, or is it really different?
Yeah, when you collage in the buildings and the houses, they're always straight head on to the camera, they're flat to the camera.
That was dictated. Well, a lot of that was dictated by what my father took,
Right.
actually, because that's what he did. So then that's what I did, you know. So
Yeah.
that followed on.
I was wondering
Yeah,
if that was a decision because then it allowed you to show the doorways and reveal the space behind. Whereas if obviously they were more oblique angle, you couldn't get such a view through the doorways.
Basically, yes, it must have been a decision, mustn't it? Yeah. Because it's all about doorways. That's right. And that, that doorway, that isn't actually our front door. It was a friend's front door.
You kind of, even though it's a made-up landscape and surreal kind of landscape, there's still rules of perspective and naturalistic colour. Are you not tempted to fiddle with this kind of reality?
Well, sometimes it's a little bit intensified. Some of the flowers, for example, I might have intensified, and the older photographs I have coloured in. But I think on the whole, if you
But real life fiddles with reality. You go out and you see like a field of poppies over there, and it's shown such a bright primary colour. It leaps right to the foreground. It's just messing your head up. and your sense of depth, and the same with like a field of those red rape or whatever, and suddenly you get a colour right over there that's coming right forward, and you're thinking, if I put this in a painting, it would ruin the painting, because it, you know, people wouldn't see, but actually I'm looking at it in real life, you know, and, you know.
But no, I think it's got a temptation of turning the sky green or having flying pigs, or, you know.
I do know what you mean. I suppose no. Because to me, the playing around with it bit is, this was the road we lived in, and I flooded it. That's the playing around with it, rather than objects. I kind of like that better somehow, making nature infiltrate. You know, in the first days of Photoshop, there were some really awful things where people did do this and stuff like that. I think I was trying so hard to get away from that. You know, oh, let's cut out a pig and put it in it. You know, I don't know, and then it looked awful. So,
the thing that strikes me is it's kind of like an altered reality, and it kind of, you know, when you know, your mind fragments memories. You kind of, just as you might see a field of poppies in reality, but you know, you actually do that in your memory. Certain things kind of come to the foreground, and in a way that seems to me is a sort of filtering process that is perhaps the sort of haphazardness and randomness of memory itself.
I think that's a good time to end. So, I think we call it a day there, a break for 15 minutes. Thank you very much, Carritt. Whether we want to join in, I think they're sort of fairly flexible about, but we'll just take it from there. It's going to be good.
Yeah, there's about 10 questions in total, but I don't know if we'll actually get through them all, but we're just going to start asking each other the questions. There's sort of questions which we would be interested to ask each other in relation to our practice, and so hopefully it might be of interest to you as well. Yeah, and then we'll just see what happens. And from these questions, hopefully we'll then be able to refer to kind of some pieces of work that we've made. I'm not too sure exactly which ones yet, but we're just going to kind of find them as we think they may or may not be relevant. So, hello Dan.
John.
So I ask you the first question.
Yeah,
it's a nice easy one, nice sort of background question here. And we met on a foundation course when we were 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And I remember you wanted to be a painter, and you were painting. My memory was that in the style of Giacometti or possibly Bacon, something like that. And so my question to you is, what happened? Why are you not painting?
Okay, I think funny we have probably slightly different memory of what I thought I was doing is probably not what you thought I was doing. But yeah, I wasn't quite sure at that stage whether I wanted to be a painter or whether I wanted to be a sculptor. And I was doing paintings that incorporated three-dimensional elements, but I was also doing some kind of sculptural work as well. But I wasn't at that stage. I mean, this is ancient history, really. But I wasn't sure at that stage whether what I really wanted to say. I didn't have anything much to express in either medium. I felt I was kind of going through the motions of, there were certain artists I liked. I did like Giacometti. I did like Bacon up to a point. Probably weren't my primary influences. And I felt I was just, making pastiches of the work of the artists that I liked, really. I wasn't, and I was happy enough during foundation just going through the motions of making certain amount of work. But when I got to degree course, I then had a bit of a crisis about, okay, why am I here now? What am I supposed to be doing? Didn't know whether I wanted to be a painter or a sculptor, or hadn't really at that stage thought about the kind of work that we make now. I probably wasn't really very aware of that kind of stuff at that stage. think the art history training we had at Foundation was fairly traditional, probably stopped about 1950, 1960. So the sort of what's kind of more loosely been termed conceptual practice didn't really come into it, and I probably wasn't that aware of that kind of stuff. So I did have a bit of a crisis on my BA, and I dropped out. But then a couple of years later, started an art history degree through the Open University, and then started to find out actually these are the things that really interest me. Some more kind of historical debates and the theoretical debates that were going on. Especially there was a very influential course called Modern Art Practices and Debates, which was put together by Charles Harrison of Art and Language with other people, and I found that course very interesting, very inspiring, and I think it kind of led into an interest in making the kind of work we make now. And you wanted to be at that stage you were making photographs, you were a photographer. So what was your sort of...
Why am I not doing that?
Yeah, why are you not making photographs?
Well, we had, on that foundation course, we had a fantastic visiting lecturer who run the photography module. And so, with him, you say the course that we were doing was very traditional. And so he brought kind of new ways of thinking about art and making art. He brought art theory and art history with him, which I wasn't familiar with. But also he brought kind of a whole kind of wider culture with him as well. He brought music and literature. His name was Nicholas Sinclair, actually. I think he still lives in Brighton. He's a photographer. But he brought all those sort of things, and it was quite an enlightening experience for me for him to be my tutor. And so I continued with photography, but I think in some ways it is coincidental that if he had come along as the sculpture tutor, I would have done sculpture. If he had come along as the painting tutor, I would have done painting. But he just brought all these things with him, and it happened to be photography. So for quite a few years, I concentrated on photography. But I never felt kind of that I was tied to that medium. I never felt that I was a photographer as such. But I just happened to use that medium to explore the things I was interested in for those few years. Yeah. Because when we met again, because we sort of lost touch, didn't we? So every now and then we'd meet up with each other.
Yeah. So following foundation, we sort of saw each other probably sporadically for a few years, but started meeting up again more regularly probably around 2000 actually. Yeah. And then I think the first works we made together were probably 2002-ish. The one you saw prior to this, actually, the one with the smoking artists, was one of the first works we made.
Shot in the Phoenix as well.
Shot in the Phoenix in the Barratt studio. Yeah.
Is Sarah here?
Smoking.
Where's Sarah? And Sarah, now I am the fire warden for Phoenix. I promise it will never happen again. This is the days before those things, because you can see how young you look.
So my question would be that when we met up around that time again and started seeing each other more often, what do you think it was at that time that made us think we'd be able to work together? And did you think what were the advantages we perceived of that maybe working in a collaboration would give? Yeah.
Well, my memory is that when we met at that time, I just started to make sort of work on my own, hadn't I? And then we met up again, and we kind of realised that we were very much in the same place. We were interested in the same artists, same sort of theory. We had very similar ideas about if we were to make art, what we would make. And so it just seemed like a natural progression from spending time talking about art and really enjoying that as a social activity. It just seemed quite natural to then make work together as another social activity. So it wasn't like we had some kind of program, or some kind of contract to follow, that we made an agreement that we were going to do something. But it's more of a social thing which kind of naturally developed into doing those things together. Yeah, I think.
So, and what do you think the advantages of working collaboratively were?
Well, there was the kind of the playfulness of it, playing with someone rather than on your own. You're actually, as I say, it's a social activity, and you're playing with someone, you're kind of relation to someone, so that was a very enjoyable part of it. I don't know how conscious we were, but also kind of rather like the idea of when more than one person is doing something, there's no sense of anyone having a kind of original idea, and so you get away from that kind of idea of the genius artist who's locked up, having these fantastic ideas, and it becomes something different than that.
I think that was kind of incidental, but it was something we saw as an advantage to working as a duo here.
Yeah, so we started collaborating then in roughly 2001. So what do you think one of the earliest pieces that we made was, which you think still kind of carries interest that we have today? I'll find it on here.
I think actually, even in the very first bits of work that we made together, although I wouldn't hold them up now and say that this is the perfect example of what we, of our practice, and I would have probably certain reservations about them. I think there's the kernel of the interest that we've developed later on as our practice has progressed. So one of the first things we made was that we were in an exhibition at the Museum of Domestic Design and Architecture, which was at Middlesex University. It was called Inside Out, and we made a piece called Exhale.
Video piece. Yeah,
video piece, which was the premise of the exhibition. I mean, I guess the title gives you the premise, really. It was about playing with the idea of inside and outside, internal and external. So one of the things we did was we made two pieces of work for that show, actually, but this was one of them, where we made a video of the vent outside the museum, which was venting steam. The heating system was venting steam to the outside, and just installed the video in the inside of the museum. And we set up the camera at this distance from the vent such that it would kind of have a real struggle focusing on the steam. It would shift in and out of focus. We were quite interested in that idea of the sort of museums, the waste essentially from the museum, bringing that back into the museum, and sort of thinking about sort of qualitative judgments about things that are inside and things that are outside. So I think it's quite a simple piece, but it does have that kind of as I said, a kernel of the interest we progressed.
Of course, you can't see an installation shot of that.
Yeah.
But that's just a video. But it would have been nice to have an installation shot of actually seeing that inside the museum.
Yeah.
So you have that venting back into the museum.
Yeah. And as you say, we had to. It's looped with the person working the lens of condensation. Yeah.
I suppose one of the things that we've carried through in later work is an interest in institutions like the museum, the gallery, and things like that. And so
sorry, I was just going to say, and the other piece we made for the same show, which is a piece called Scissors, Paper, Stone, which has the same sort of interest in the institution as such. Basically, with this one, we bought some decorative wrapping paper from the museum gift shop. We wrapped some of the decorative pebbles that were in the front of the museum with the paper and put it back in situ. We took photographs of ourselves wrapping the pebbles, produced those as postcard size images, and put them in the museum, back into the gift shop, in the postcard rack. So people were free to take. We didn't charge for them; they were just free to take a postcard and take. So the idea here was. Looking at the resources that the museum provided and making something out of that. But also there was the idea, I think, of we wanted to sort of break apart the idea of a sort of integrated bit of work, just a single thing that you look at. So there's at least three elements to the work. There's the buying of the papers and the wrapping of the stones and the photographing of us wrapping this and then putting the postcards back in the gift rack, and then of course the postcards are further distributed, so the work becomes a really fragmented, distributed piece. And I think that's a concern we've had in a lot of our later work, to sort of try and have an idea that's that just isn't like a very contained idea that kind of spreads out and just, you know, isn't a simple just one. I mean, we have made objects that are fairly self-contained, but yeah, I think that's an interest we've you know, developed later as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. There's definitely kind of small elements in that, but I think it's the next couple of pieces of work we made, which for me, and I think maybe for you, kind of really carries more of what
I think we were
interests
sort
you
of
today.
just building up a bit of speed. At this
Yeah, a
point.
bit of speed. Yeah. I don't know how this works. No, anyway. Yeah. This is the real thing.
Yeah. So did you want to talk about this, or?
Yeah, this is floor of a gallery, which we've actually laid a self-levelling compound over a part of the gallery floor. You have to actually, that door there, that was the entrance, or there's another room, the front room there, this is the back room, so you have to actually then kind of come through that doorway and walk over the floor as you enter the back gallery.
Can I just interject here? It was, as you can see, it's a very rough and ready space. It was in the exhibition was called Domestically Spaced, and it was about, I think the premise of this one was about it had previously been a domestic residence, and it was being in the process of being converted into a gallery space, and a lot of the work that was made was supposed to sort of take on that idea and play with that idea, which is what we thought we would do. Yeah.
And also, I think one thing that we kind of carried with us a lot, well, in fact, that we can jump to, there was we actually sort of revisited Floor Screed years later, a couple of years ago, when we had an exhibit in the Present Tense exhibition. So I just quickly jumped to that.
Which was in the gallery here.
Which was in the gallery here a couple of years ago. What was it called? 1 to 1.
1 to 1. Yeah.
1 to 1. And there was something quite different going on in some ways. This is actually a 1-to-1 floor plan of our studio, which we've kind of brought down to the gallery, so to speak, and made it in a levelling compound.
Is it clear which is the area we're talking about? It's this. This.
Oh, right, yeah.
That is the floor plan of the studio. There's a little.
Yeah. And also, you want to point out the.
Oh yeah, and this is a little panel of the same levelling compound. It's the dimensions of the pillar that comes down into the middle. So it's a displacement from our studio floor.
You don't have a pillar in your studio?
No. No. I think, so working on the floor, something you can walk on, you can kind of interact in that way has kind of interested us. The idea that it could be something which could be overlooked quite easily as well.
And it was in this exhibition.
And was
quite a lot.
was it? Yeah, maybe.
People imagine that the plan of the exhibition. Where's the Carritt and Palmer work?
Yeah.
Oh, we're sending them.
Yeah. So that idea of the work being partly invisible, or it's on one hand we know they're kind of obviously pieces of artwork, but on the other hand we want them to be kind of at times as invisible as possible. And so there's the possibility that they aren't actually pieces of artwork, but we kind of know they are. So it's a bit like wanting to have our cake and eat it in some ways, isn't it? But it's that kind of contradiction between the two that we kind of like to see how far or how close we can come to produce something which is overlooked.
For example, with the other one, the first levelling compound work we made that was in the Domestically Spaced exhibition, it was very much about it being both a real floor, because you had to cross it to get to the back gallery, the back room of the gallery. So, it was very much a floor that you had to cross, but also, obviously, it's to be seen in the context of an exhibition. So, it's a bit of art, if you want to call it that, as well, at the same time. And that was the same with this, actually, which was another piece we made. It wasn't in Domestically Spaced, was it? It was in the next show we did, which actually we curated a show at the same space. It was called Bathos, and we arranged, this is in the days before, well, it wasn't pre-internet really, but there was a different way of doing things then, certainly. And we went down to a florist's and arranged for a florist to deliver a bouquet of flowers to the exhibition that we were curating. with the message card you can see, sorry, actually we requested it to say sorry we didn't make it, but the florist adapted it.
Corrected it.
Corrected it. So there's a little, there's a kind of 3-part joke going on about we didn't make the bouquet of flowers, we didn't make the exhibition, we didn't get there, and we didn't make it as artists or curators. So
failure all round.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, it's something which you just so easily, I think, was overlooked. In fact, I think someone else turned up for one of the other exhibitors with a large bunch of flowers, which was larger than ours, and ended up putting it next to on the table. And so it kind of like outdid our flowers.
We were trumped our own game.
Yeah. But that's exactly why we chose the flowers, because it was something which you would expect to see in an exhibition. So it could be overlooked. And there's the other story I love about that exhibition is that one of the other exhibitors that we had, can't remember his name.
Matt Jenner.
Was it Matt Jenner?
Yeah.
And he had made these kind of MDF kind of radiator replicas, and we hung them where you'd expect just to see a radiator on the wall. And my sister,
no pipe work. Right?
Yeah, no pipe work, just this kind of MDF looking radiator.
Yeah.
And my sister-in-law turned up and just arrived, and she had her handbag on with her, and she looked around for somewhere to put her handbag, and she hung it over the artwork radiator. So that was that was for me, that was a signal of the success of the exhibition. But yeah, they're 2 early works then, which I think we still really carry a lot of things.
Definitely
with
this
today.
one. I think people often respond quite favourably to this one. It's sort of seen as a bit of a kind of seminal work for us, I think.
Won't go that far, but.
Should we move on?
Yeah.
Ready to move on?
Next question.
So the next question, I don't know whether I don't think the person's here who said this, but someone once referred to us as hard-nosed conceptual artists. So someone who has a studio here. So do you think that is would you think that's a fair description of what we do?
I was dreading this question. Well, all I know is that we avoid the word conceptual almost pathologically. Don't we? I don't think we've ever used it to describe.
We've tried not to.
We've tried not to, but I don't. We've never used it to kind of in a statement about our work or writing about our work.
Occasionally, I think we have to in conversations between ourselves.
Maybe, yeah.
Publicly, no.
Yeah, but it's one of so we avoid the word. But the strange thing is, the more you avoid it, that just seems to convince people even more that's what your work is. So you can't win. But the reasons why we try to avoid it and why I'm comfortable about using it is, first of all, it's become such a kind of a muddy term that it refers to such a variety of practices that when someone uses the term, you don't really know what they're referring to. And there's practices which are referred to as being conceptual, which I think are so different from ours that it just doesn't seem a useful term to use, because it doesn't seem to sort of tell you much these days about someone's practice. And so that's one reason why I tend not to use it. The other reason why I don't use it is because it's used, and often in a maybe rather kind of lazy way, but it's used to sort of mean anti-painting in some way. And again, that's not something. It can be used as anti-painting, some kind of opposed to painting. Your work is opposed to painting if it's conceptual, and that's something which I'm not comfortable with, because obviously, in any medium it can be conceptual, if you want to call it that. So there are reasons why we completely avoid the term. But however, having said that, we do realise that we're quite indebted to a group of artists from the late 60s, early 70s, sort of 66 or 72, the normal kind of dates given, aren't they, because of Lucy Lippard's book. But we realise that we're very indebted to those kind of artists and the kind of the work that they were making, and the kind of the strategies they were using to make their work. And for example, the idea takes precedence over the object, and there was to use Lucy Lippard's term, there was a dematerialisation of the object. And so the object sort of gradually started to be removed, dematerialised, and so it was the idea. But obviously, however you document an idea, you always end up with an object, so you can't quite escape that. But her idea was that it was a gradual kind of sort of removing of that object, and so the work would be done via sort of documentation of events. It would be well, in those days it would have been things like fax, words, photographs, kind of ephemeral materials.
Yeah.
I suppose that's something which we see in our work quite a lot, the idea that actually a lot of the work we do doesn't have a very long lifespan.
Yeah.
And so it either gets destroyed, consumed in some cases, or rots away. And so it has
consumed image.
Consumed image.
I think it's one of the things we kind of struggle with as well, is our sort of, as John put it, our indebtedness to work of that kind of period, because a lot of that work is can be seen as quite sort of austere, quite arid, quite dry. In fact, we went to an exhibition at Tate Britain, didn't we? I mean, I've seen a lot of exhibitions of conceptual art in my time, but we went to one at Tate Britain, probably 5 years ago or something. Can't remember the title of it now, but I came out of that thinking I never want to see a show of conceptual art again. It was just so black and white, really austere, lacking in any sort of visual pleasure at all. Apart from the last room, they'd sort of looked like they'd had an afterthought. Oh yeah, we better put some colour in. You know? So in the last room, there were a few things that did offer you some kind of a little morsel of visual pleasure. But, so it's a struggle with. I find, I'm always constantly aware. Yes, we're very indebted to that work, but I want to give a little bit more than. I don't want it to be seen as quite that dry, quite that austere.
I think there's just as many differences, large differences, between our work and the work of that period, that historical moment, as there are similarities, and so that's why it doesn't seem to make sense to sort of align ourselves with that. But that work. I've characterised it as being some of it being quite dry, but it was very varied, that period as well, which I think sometimes gets a bit overlooked. A lot of those artists were working with humour. And I think that's one of the aspects that we've picked up and sort of run with more, is the sort of kind of humorous, the lighter, more humorous side.
And there's there's quite a few jokes in our work as we see it.
So ultimately, we could say that we were artists who are indebted to historical conceptual art of 1966, 1972. But it doesn't roll off the tongue very well. This, talking about work being consumed, this was... do you want to say what this was?
This was a bit of work we made for an exhibition, a London exhibition called... what was it called?
For Those Killed in Ambush.
For Those Killed in Ambush, yeah. And so essentially, I mean, you can see what it was. We made some 12 bottles of elderflower wine, homemade wine, and 12 bottles of blackcurrant wine, and we donated it to the curators of the show to serve up at the private view.
I don't think we didn't actually. We gifted them, not knowing what they were going to do with it.
Well, I think we imagined that that's what would happen to it. Well, I did, I don't know.
My memory is that we didn't know it could have been exhibited as an object. It could have. We didn't know. But
okay.
maybe.
We didn't say this is what should happen to it. But I think I kind of imagined that that's what might happen to it. We didn't put any parameters on what they should do with it. But they did, as it happened, they did serve it to visitors. I think they weren't quite sure what to really make of it at all.
I didn't have any conversation with them about it at all, so I don't know.
And the other piece of work we had in this show, I think they were rather nonplussed by it as well.
So then we have the photograph at the bottom is, I think, which was taken by friends of ours who were there, because we weren't actually there, were we? I think that's our wine being. I think I don't know, Claire. Maybe you can tell me. It was being sold, was it?
It was, and I objected. I said, "You can't sell this as an art."
And we never received any of the money either.
I didn't know the terms, that you offered it up for them to do whatever they wanted.
It was a gift.
Was it drinkable? It was very nice.
It's all right. Yeah.
Was it dry?
Was it dry wine?
You just talk about things being too dry.
Left us a bad aftertaste.
Yeah, it went down quite well.
Yeah, I don't think anyone. Yeah, I think a lot of people just drank it without really knowing what was.
Yeah. So that was consumed. It disappeared. Yeah. We haven't got anything left of that.
No,
we don't think.
What's left is what you see there.
Yeah. So it's just sort of documented. I'll just show a couple of the images. Shall I put down here? 100 ml of 100 ml of triethylene glycol vaporised and distributed throughout a 59 cubic metre space, then allowed to disperse. This is it playing?
Yep.
Oh, it is playing.
So this is a rather sort of a time-lapse documentation of a piece that probably, I can't remember how long it took to fill the space and for it to disperse. It was probably a couple of hours altogether, but we've edited a sort of time-lapsed version of it together here.
Yeah. This is the gallery. This is a gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the ideas we were playing with here was the idea of we talked about how we were quite interested in the institution of the museum, of the gallery, of the studio, and this was about the gallery in a way being a container for work. And it's very literally a container here. It contains the smoke in a sort of almost cubic space, not quite, so a bit of a joke on the white cube idea.
It defines the actual space of the if you want to call it a sculptural work, it kind of actually goes the parameters of what the sculpture, what the space could be.
So we documented, we had 2 cameras set up. I mean, the video isn't really the work, is it? The event was the work.
Yeah, again, that's a similarity with those 66 to 72 artists that we're talking about. That there's nothing left at the end. You document an intervention, or you document some activity that you're doing.
So we shot it from inside and outside.
Yeah,
and it was quite a funny moment.
The best bits to come. Yeah. This is kind of audience reaction.
Did anybody call the fire brigade?
There was an issue, wasn't it? What was that? We had to notify them before or something?
Yeah, I think we did notify. I think the gallery said, we're happy for you to do this, but we need to let the local fire brigade know that it's going on, just in case anyone reports it.
One of the interesting things for me as well is that how it might relate to some of the work of Rachel White-Reed. As she kind of fills a space, but she ends up with some kind of monumental object. But where this is something which is very temporary, ephemeral, disappears, and one of the things in relation to that dematerialisation which we're interested in is also decommodification. That kind of attempt to kind of where artwork, it can't be worth anything. There we go. Everyone's a critic.
Did you pay him?
And the last one maybe in relation to those things we were talking about.
We're doing for time. We need to.
Have
we got Russell? Have we got?
Well,
how long have we got?
Just
keep
end.
going.
We'll end.
Yeah, keep going. Okay.
This is. Can you read the title? An unattributed remark. It's the actual text. It's all. There's no spaces between the letters, between the words. But I'll read it for you. It says, "An empty taxi drew up, and Carritt and Palmer stepped out."
So actually, this was a piece of work we made for an exhibition about jokes. Actually, it never actually got shown. I don't think the exhibition happened, did it? So it wasn't shown. We only showed it actually quite a few years later at the Open Studios. We put it up outside our studio. But the idea was that basically it's a joke about a taxi. It's black, it's reflective, it's shiny. Apparently the quote is the unattributed remark. If you were to attribute it, it's supposed to have been said by Churchill about Clement Attlee. He said, an empty taxi drew up and Clement Attlee stepped out, or got out.
Been an uncharismatic character.
Yeah, being a sort of, not very flamboyant and uncharismatic character.
So we sort of placed ourselves in position of Attlee then, didn't we?
Yeah, we appropriated the remark, But there's a thing going on with, because it's perspex with a sheet of black perspex with vinyl lettering, black vinyl lettering laid over it, and then a sheet of glass framed. And so it's hyper reflective. So if you stand in front of it, you can barely read the text. You have to move from side to side. All you can really see is your own image reflected back at you in the glass. Yeah.
It sort of relates to the next question, which I was going to ask you. I think it's the next question about. Yeah, do you think there's a lack of visual pleasure in our work? If that is the case, are you worried about that?
Well, we sort of touched upon our indebtedness to sort of 60s, 70s conceptual art and how that was quite dry in some instances. And I think some of our pieces have a similar sort of withdrawn quality to them. This being a case in point. What you see here is it's 4 pieces of 2x2 batten that are hinged together. You can see the hinges at this end. If you were to open it out, the 2 inside faces of each piece of batten are really beautifully coloured with like enamel, beautiful smooth enamel paint.
You can just see the edges.
Yeah, you can just see the green up the. So if you were to open them out, fold them out, they're rather beautiful things actually. But I mean, it's kind of quite withdrawn, I think, this piece. So yeah, it doesn't give much.
But it's taken away what would have been a visual.
Yeah. So I think,
engagement
and in other bits of work, could you put up maybe? Is there something you want to say to me? There's another piece of work we made. Actually, the brief for this exhibition was fairly well defined, so it didn't give you a lot of freedom within. So you're supposed. The brief was to present some text on an A4 piece of paper. The font was already predetermined. The size was determined. It was I think you could only have black print. So here we are. This is us. Is there something you want to say to me? I think we thought, there's you see this kind of text-based work quite a lot, and quite often people are very kind of didactic in their approach, and there's a lot of really dense, heavy text that telling you stuff, or you have to plough through paragraph, a whole really dense paragraph of this stuff. And we wanted to just turn it around and say, okay, perhaps the audience brings something to the exhibition as well, and not, it's not just about consuming all this really heavy stuff. But we didn't want to say, is there something you want to say to us, because that seemed to personalise it too much. So it's a sort of anonymous voice, really. Is there something you want to say to me? But actually, rather beautifully, we were shown next to a Robert Barry piece. Robert Barry is one of the, for those that don't know, was one of the sort of original conceptual artists from the 1960s, 1970s. So it was rather pleasing to be shown next to one of his bits, actually.
One of the ones we actually quite like, isn't it?
Yeah, we do. We enjoy some of the Robert Barry stuff. Yeah. So, and yes, I do. I think sometimes there's a kind of withdrawn quality to what we do. It doesn't perhaps it doesn't seem to offer much to the viewer, and I would be concerned if I felt that was a sort of a deterrent to sort of the audience engaging with the work. But hopefully, what we do, hopefully there's a sort of different kind of pleasure at stake in what we do, and it's about the pleasure of joining us in sort of playing along with the little games that we're playing,
rather than being hit by something kind of immediately visual.
Yeah, it's asking you to be.
But it is visual. But it is visual.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an aesthetic to what we do, I think. Yeah, but whether that gives you visual pleasure, the jury's out. So.
It's kind of a judgment question, isn't it, about what one finds visually pleasurable? And I would say that I find this visually pleasurable, even though it's a very kind of austere, kind of Protestant kind of visuals.
Yeah, but what I would hope was that the audience kind of joins us in playing the little games with it, and enjoys the little jokes and it's the pleasure of we have pleasure making these things and enjoying the back and forth, and hopefully the audience gets involved in that. as well.
Mm.
So yeah, it would concern me if I thought, you know, the viewer couldn't get anything out of the work.
Yeah.
But hopefully there's enough in there for people to go along with us. Yeah.
This one here this was for a catalogue produced by friends of ours and fellow collaborators. They're in the room somewhere, Scanlon and Cravell, and it was for their catalogue they had for the Sussex Open. I think it says up there, doesn't it? Yeah. And this is a catalogue which I feel like I should get them to explain it, but this is a catalogue which included, you can make your own catalogue, so all the pages are there laid out.
Loose leaf, yeah.
Loose leaf, and so you can make your own catalogue of all the applicants who had got rejected from the Sussex Open.
Yeah. So you make your own, it's like a salon de refuse in catalogue form.
Yeah. And well, we weren't refused though, were we? But they also invited some other artists as well to make a page for the catalogue, and this is our page for the catalogue, which just consists of 2 strips of double-sided sticky tape, which
there's some text underneath.
There is some text underneath.
So if you peel the tape off to reveal the text, then obviously you've revealed the sticky surface of the tape, and it will adhere to the work facing you. But it's not like we're targeting any one artist, because depending on how you put the catalogue together, because it's loose leaf, it could be any artist. So again, it's
you end up with an editing out process.
Yeah, an editing out process. We edit ourselves out, and we take one other artist down with us. It could be anyone.
Shall I ask the next question?
Yeah.
No, you're asking the next question.
Oh, do I? Yeah. Okay.
What was the question we just asked?
That was the one about visual pleasure.
Oh yeah, you're the next question.
So, we haven't really touched on this actually, but to what extent do you feel a need to explain the context in which some of our work was made? Actually, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so do I feel it's necessary to explain the context in which our work was made?
Yeah, so I suppose that follows on from my question, from my answer to your previous question, where I was saying I hope there's enough for the audience to be going on with.
Yeah.
You think we need to clue the audience in, or?
Well, I prefer that there is at least a title that goes with the works. I think the title is always very important in what we produce. So I'd always prefer the title to be there, and also I would prefer sometimes, not always, but sometimes, for some information to be there about what the work was made for, because so often we make work which is for a specific location, and if it was to be removed from that location, it would be something quite different.
It's either made for a location or a particular exhibition.
A particular exhibition. So this was actually made for an exhibition, it doesn't even say it up there, but it was made for an exhibition which is entitled A Show About the Show, and by a young group of curators called the Scaffold Gallery, wasn't it? And they're very interesting. They don't actually have a gallery, they're like a cuckoo in other people's galleries. They organise exhibitions, and so this is made specifically for that exhibition, A Show About the Show. And I think that amount of information is quite important, I think, when you're sort of looking at that work, because then you start to get the connections possibly with the choice of postcard and why, what message has been written on the postcard, etc. But after that, I don't really care what happens, when the work goes out there into the world and cut the apron strings and let it go, sort of thing. It doesn't bother me at all what happens and what people make of it. It's really not, not interested in that. I mean, in fact, if anything, some of the feedback we've had from people is even better than what we thought of work.
It's rather nice when people have completely different takes on your work.
Yeah.
Than the way you've thought about it. That's happened a few times, hasn't it?
I mean, you never knew that Paradise Lost and Don Quixote would end up there together.
We didn't know Paradise Lost was going to end up there.
Yeah, I mean,
no, absolutely.
Complete chance,
yeah. Everything else is sort of is controlled in a sense, isn't it? But you're right. Yeah, that was a lovely sort of addition to it. Paradise Lost. And so that did get thrown away, or unless they breached the contract and didn't.
Yeah, we employed a cleaner, as it says there. We employed the cleaner to come in at the end of the show. Yeah. It's about the show about the show. I'm now explaining what the work's about. Having said that, we don't feel a need to do that. But the cleaner came in at the end of the show to tidy up the space. It's about how the work that's done to maintain the gallery and the exhibition that's unseen. But we deliberately didn't want to document the work of the cleaner because we didn't want to sort of elevate that or fetishise that work that was going on, so it just exists as
and then thrown away
as that postcard that was then thrown away at the end of the show, by the cleaner. Yeah. So it is a contradiction, isn't it? I mean, you do sometimes feel, I just want to, give you a little little helping hand in understanding what our thought processes were, but we recognise that you can't. It just becomes something else. It goes out there, and people make of it what they make of it.
Yeah, and so be it.
You have to sort of accept that reality, I think.
Sure, another one kind of audience response to something which was quite delightful.
Yeah.
What was that in there? Something did in one of the open studios. The thing was waiting for something better, and a ticket dispensed on it. Ooh, and then we came back one evening and found that people had taken the tickets and they had inserted them all around different places in the studio, and so all these tickets were kind of like hanging on the light switch, shoved in keyholes, shoved in all different holes and hung on hooks. And
any little space in our studio, people found a place to put a ticket in, like screw holes and so forth. So that was rather a nice kind of something unimagined. We never imagined that was going to happen.
Well, that was what the better we were waiting for, maybe.
Yes.
We came back to find better.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you feel that you own some of the artwork more than others?
So
for me,
a question about the collaborative process, I suppose. Yeah.
Do you feel you own certain artworks more than I do?
No, because I think what happens in the process of collaborating is that ideas get batted back and forth so much that by the time anything finished gets shown, or work gets finished, we can't remember who contributed, what the specific contributions of each of us were. It just becomes what it is at the end. And I think you made the analogy once about going out to play a game of football with your friends. I mean, it's about our enjoyment of the process of collaborating.
Yeah.
And it's like two friends, a group of friends going out to play a game of football. It's not important who asked who to go out and play the game. It's the game that results from that. Yeah.
And the game develops as you play it, so it doesn't really relate to the origin of the idea of who it was.
It can become completely the process of collaboration. Whoever came up with the initial idea, by the time a finished bit of work gets shown, generally, perhaps not always, but generally it's become so transformed from what your original idea was that you don't even
you've got no idea.
Really.
Kind of thought, In fact, if anything, we often think that it was the other person who thought of it. And But I suppose there's an obsession, though, isn't there, in the arts, that idea of origin, the idea of who had the original idea, who made it first, where did it come from, and that's one of the enjoyments about collaborating. Is it kind of pushes that away in a way.
I think that's that goes back to the earlier question that I asked you about. What did you see were some of the advantages of working as a collaboration? So, I guess we probably should be winding up in a minute.
Yeah, we out of time.
We've got time for a bit. One more question, maybe?
Got one more question.
Or should we turn it over to the audience for questions?
Don't mind.
Russ?
As people wish, really. I mean, my observation would be, I really love this, because what I love so much about it is you've got two people two artists, and it seems to be an absence of ego, which is great. And
we do fight as well in the studio.
Pardon?
We do fight in the studio sometimes.
I've seen the bruises, but I've just really enjoyed it, and it'd be great if people would ask questions. Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah,
turn
do
it
that.
over.
Yeah, let's do that.
Question over here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
The piece of work that you did for the poster,
yeah.
could you, it's such a brilliant...
I don't think it's on here.
Did we not put it on?
What was it called? We made that for Spotlight. Because when you asked us to do Spotlight, we thought, oh, we'd like to make an image for Spotlight that kind of somehow reflects the idea of kind of being together and collaborating together as well. So
I think I was going to say something about that. Where, what was I going to say about that? I think I was going to say that, yeah, it's just kind of a metaphor for our practice, really, because relating to that sort of, one of the questions we were going to ask, had we had a bit more time, was how, if one of us died tonight, was the question, how, would you carry on working? Yeah. How would you see your work developing? Yeah. And I think we both had the answer, yes, we would carry on working, but the work we imagined we would make independently was quite different from the work we actually make together. And it seems to be, it's like a Venn diagram, you know, here's our interests, and then where it crosses over tends to be the work we end up making. So this is a kind of analogue to that, really. The shirt is, the two shirts buttoned together are like the confining limits of our practice. We can't get away from each other. So yeah, an alternative title we sort of read recently and thought that would have also been a good title, was We'll Never Be This Close Again.
What does it actually say?
It says
we will have each other. We will have each other all. We will have each other always.
I like the process of encountering your pieces. You know, you kind of go in, you're not quite sure what's going on, or you know, that kind of, it's like that old adage that line of humour speaks volumes of a theory. You're kind of left, although you have no object, you're left with the sense of what it is that's absent or in the air that you walk away with, which I think is very powerful. You know, it can be quite profound, or it can be quite light. You know, even if it is light, it can sort of, you know, like the flowers, because you could read that on so many levels.
Yes, I mean that's something that we always hope to try and to achieve in the work that we make, is there's a possibility of those different levels, and it you know, and it is very light in some ways, and you know, we enjoy that element of it, but if one, you know, there's other things in there as well, but yeah, so that we like to build those lots of different levels there to keep it open for lots of people.
Do you ever label the works when you show them to sort of, you know, draw some attention to them, or are they just left?
What, like the flowers, for example? Good question.
It's an issue we kind of wrestle with quite a lot, actually, that kind of labelling of work. With the flowers, that was a sort of solution to the problem anyway, because it carried its own title with it, because the card that the florist wrote was actually the title of the work anyway.
Floor, though.
The floor. Other times we've tried to incorporate titles into the work, so you don't have to display a separate titling panel or whatever next to it. Obviously, sometimes you're at the mercy of what curators want to do in putting a show together. But so sometimes we've tried to incorporate the title into the work in some way.
On the plinth, though, waiting for something better was on the plinth.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it just feels clunky, and you think no.
But it's something they're always really conscious of. In some ways, maybe trying to avoid that kind of plaque on the wall telling you, what the title is and what it is. But it's very difficult to get away from that sometimes. But that's one thing we're very conscious of trying to do often. So the title actually becomes part of the work, because we think the titles are so important that we want it to be. It is part of the work. We don't want it to be kind of separate in some way.
Or the material, like for instance on a plaque you would usually list
material.
What it
Well, that's interesting as well, because I think to know the material is sometimes really important as well. But you have to go on a plaque. So that's the kind of that's the kind of things that we exactly one of the things that we struggle with.
We wrestle with on a weekly basis. Yeah.
Over a desk in the studio. Bit like this actually. We have a chair either side of the desk, and then I have the chair near the heater. You have the.
I have the cold side.
You have the cold side.
Cold side of the bed.
Yeah.
Add your third verse to the title of conceptual.
Yeah.
Is there another descriptive word that you could allow us to describe yourselves?
Well, I suppose that's sort of it's the joke I was making about being artists who are attributed to historical moment of conceptual art, 66, 72. But I don't know. I think that's a common thing with most artists, isn't it? They kind of struggle to know what to call themselves. So I'm sure it's a very kind of common thing that artists struggle with.
Yeah, it's something we have when you have to write statements, and they advise you, put a little punchy description of yourself.
Yeah, 6 words.
Jesus. How do you do that?
Yeah, if you can do it, I think you're in trouble.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Anything else?
What are you working on at the moment?
Huh?
What are you working on at the moment?
Well, we'll continue those self-containing objects, aren't we? We're doing a kind of number of versions of those.
We've got a clothing line.
Oh yeah, a suit. We made a suit. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And the t-shirts.
And a t-shirt, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you need being kitted out for the summer, we've got a thing just for you.
I don't think you'd want to wear the suit in the summer.
I know, the suit's a bit hot. What was the suit called?
Some artist suit.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is more of a winter product, a winter outfit. It's made of a removals blanket to protect, obviously, things when they're being moved. So this is recently made, and we're doing some t-shirts as well. But the other one we're kind of working on is a number of different versions of the self-containing object. So objects that similar things, all wood with the barrel hinges, but they all close down themselves, so you can't actually see the painted thing. So we kind of envisage maybe they'll be in the open studios this year, I don't know. But a series of wooden battens which are closed down themselves, self-contained. So we're sort of left with the kind of the material and the structure rather than the actual painted surface.
I just spotted something nice, the label on the suit.
Oh yeah.
It reminded me of the label you had for your wine as well. I know you've been asked about plaques on the wall, but do you sign off works?
No, never.
Well, is that not a signature?
What? Sorry, what?
There's the sign on the suit and the label of your wine.
The label, the stamp on the wine, I suppose, is a bit like a signature, isn't it?
And the t-shirts will be.
And the t-shirt. But and the label as well is, you're right, it is like a kind of a substitute for a signature, but it's not an actual signature, but it is a substitute of some kind.
I think, we kind of are. With the suit, we were enjoying the ambiguity, though, of whether it's, is it the artist's name, is it the branding of the suit, like Marks and Spencer, or whatever.
Dolce & Gabbana.
Yeah. So, but in a way, it's a surrogate signature, which we. Yeah, I think we were self-consciously playing with that a bit as well, yeah.
But I think because they're kind of self-consciously playing with the signature, that makes them something different than a signature. It's kind of self-conscious of itself as a signature.
And it's a sort of it's a default typeface as well, that kind of script, which is a bit like I suppose you could draw an analogy with the florist writing the card for the flowers.
The florist signed it for us. They signed John and Dan, whatever it was,
So it's a signature,
so again,
but not
substitute signature. Yeah. So it draws your attention in a way to that role of signing stuff. So.
But it still contains your names.
It does. Yeah.
Problematizing authorship.
Sorry.
Problematizing
authorship.
Authorship. Is there a word?
It's one of those.
Yeah, I think a lot of our work is kind of is self-conscious of itself as an art object and where it might appear in a gallery or a particular situation, And so, you know, it's kind of in that sense, it's kind of, well, you might use the word meta to be kind of about itself in some way. It's conscious of its place in a gallery, in an art system, and being exhibited as an object.
Yeah. And I think that idea of authorship was something that, you know, being a collaboration, even from the earliest days, we were sort of trying to not destroy the idea of the sort of aura or the sort of kind of mythic figure of the artist, of the solo artist, you know, but it was something we were aware of, that working as a duo, you know, we're sort of slightly deconstructing that perhaps a little bit.
Which comes back to Ross's point about the ego, the absence of ego.
Yeah.
Although, as you say, we haven't seen you in the studio yet.
Yeah, there's a sort of removal of ourselves from the work that we do in some ways. We've never kind of set out to make statements about ourselves or the world.
But it's one of those things, isn't it? We're in some of the work, in a way.
Yeah.
You know, our name is in some of the work, like you were saying, Tom, about the labels are our name, and in the Empty Taxi as well, it refers to Carritt and Palmer.
Yeah.
I think early on we made quite a lot of work, or had ideas for quite a few pieces that were about us, about the sort of the branding of the Carritt. Initially we were called Carritt and Palmer, and then we just changed it to John Carritt and Dan Palmer. But about the branding, so there was this. But I think we're tired of that.
Yeah. It was amusing first of all, wasn't it? You know, because it sounded like a solicitor's or a biscuit manufacturer or something like that, and that was quite amusing. But then it became more conscious of it being like a branding of us, which we weren't so keen on.
And then you look around, you see other kind of people using the same sort of similar branding, and you think, maybe that joke isn't funny anymore.
So it became more personal with the introduction of our first names as well, which maybe our work sort of. That kind of, you know, progression of our work shows that as well. The work we did first of all was much more kind of austere, and you know, we're not in it at all. But the later work we do acknowledge that, you know, we are in it in the sense that we make it. You can't help that really. That's how it is.
In practical terms, how do you meet once a week, or do you have regular kind of?
We meet regularly once a week. And then we communicate on email, or sometimes meet more than once a week. But yeah, it's a very slow practice. We have we have jobs. We work elsewhere. We're not professional artists in that sense. We don't make a living from it. We don't get any money from it. It's more of a social activity which we enjoy, and so we have to carry out our other lives, you know, for most of the week.
Yeah.
And then
make a bit of time for this.
Yeah.
But that's like the Ramones t-shirts making far more money than the Ramones records ever did.
What's that, sorry?
You know, the Ramones t-shirt with the iconic logo with their names on.
Oh, right, yeah.
Made far more money than their records ever did. You know, the art was completely overtaken financially by the branding.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Absolutely
Right, thank you.
fascinating.